Let's see. We're not, did we get an echo?
Oh, no.
Is there an? Yeah, turn your.
Beautiful. Hello? Karaoke after this? I'm gonna go in the other room because it's
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for everyone who has so graciously come to spend time with us and sort of celebrate these awesome WPI students who have spent the last 2 months, 4 if you include the spring, but essentially 4 months working on these projects. Today we are here gathered to to see the final presentations, and this sort of represents the summation of this IQP experience. We have 6 different teams that are going to present, and I imagine that some of the people online have already seen the exact format and the exact roster of teams that are presenting. We'll keep the presentations to about 15 minutes with the hopes that there may be 1 or 2 questions that add an extra 5 minutes to each presentation, but we'll try to stick as closely as we can to the schedule because we know people online are following along. We appreciate your attendance. We look forward to fielding your questions. And without further ado, why don't we start with our first group, the accessibility team.
try to give your team like fingers, like 5 minutes left.
Good evening, everyone. We are the accessibility team.
I'm Shavek Agarwal. I'm a robotics engineering major and a computer science major.
I'm Mia Borgignon. I'm an interactive media and game development major with a concentration in technical art.
I'm Sarah McCarthy. I'm a biomedical engineering major with a concentration in biomechanics. And I'm Cassandra Zimmerman. I am a civil engineering and mechanical engineering double major.
Before we proceed into the contents of our slides, I would like to share a quick anecdote that reignited our passion for this project. Our team sat comfortably around a table in one of 3 multi-tiered food courts within the Albrook Mall, the largest mall in Latin America and a signifier of progress and status. To our right, we noticed a man in a wheelchair who was forced to thrust his entire weight into the wheels of his wheelchair in order to access the food court that we as a group were able to easily access due to the incline of the ramp. This led us to wonder just how accessible Panama was.
Our sponsor, Dr. Sekulic, has voiced his concerns about the completeness of information at the Panama City Project Center, and we thank him for providing us the opportunity to promote confidence in students' decisions to attend the Panama City Project Center by improving the information available to prospective traveling students.
In creating a foundation for the background of our project, we first looked into disability and limitations, which is defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act as being a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Although it is important to note that disabilities are not the only barrier that students may face when traveling abroad. An example of an alternative barrier would be something like food allergies.
Physical accessibility helps people and anyone with entering a public space and accessing all its aspects. In general, accessibility means all users can access information in a suitable format for their needs.
Continuing on with our research, we wanted to compare what accommodations are available in the United States versus that in Panama. So to start with this, we looked into the American disability legislation, and this included the Americans with Disability Act, which has a bunch of guidelines for buildings in the the United States, as well as the FDA, which is Food and Drug Administration, who do a lot for regulation.
Oh, come on.
As well, we looked into the WPI international programs, including IQPs, MQPs, and HUAs, and the WPI campus offices.
There's like
and
questions out
maybe-
there. Throw in EKG orders. I can just chuck them in the room and do anything really quick.
Similarly to the ADA, in managing laws related to disability and accessible infrastructure. We also looked into Ciudad del Saber's campus, particularly the dormitories in which WPI students are housed during their time at the Panama City Project Center. So to achieve our goal, we developed 4 main objectives. The first was to identify the most prevalent disability and accessibility issues that affect WPI students attempting to travel abroad. The second was to assess the accommodations at Ciudad del Saber and surrounding areas regarding these disabilities. The third was to investigate the personal experiences of people with disabilities in Panama City, particularly at Ciudad del Saber. And the fourth was to advise the project center director, Dr. Sekulic, regarding available accommodations and alternatives.
To address all of these objectives, we developed a series of strategies to achieve them. To identify the concerns of WPI students, we first looked into the accommodations available at WPI. So this included looking into the Global Experiences Office and the Office of Accessibility Services to find out what they can provide students with to make them more comfortable. We then interviewed WPI staff in both of these offices to ask them what questions provide to them and what answers they feel they can provide to students. After that, we also sent out a survey to WPI students because we felt as if there was more information we weren't finding.
In assessing the project center, we again began with archival research as mentioned into Panamanian legislation and the Ciudad del Saber campus. We also conducted interviews with Panamanian subjects, particularly an architect responsible for accessible infrastructure at Ciudad del Saber and the director of the Casco Antiguo Spanish School. We also conducted observations of the Ciudad del Saber campus and other locations that WPI students visit during their time here to provide empirical data on the state of those facilities. In order to explore the personal experiences of WPI students at the Ciudad del Saber campus, we surveyed both the current and previous Panama City Project Center cohorts in order to look for barriers that we may have overlooked in our previous data collection. And we also documented personal ethnographies in order to document the experience of current students within our group that are looking to navigate the project center with disabilities and a vegetarian diet.
Lastly, we have analyzed our raw data gathered, and we have looked for quantitative patterns or trends across a large pool of responses. We have also looked for qualitative data, which is going to be individual codes or experiences. And finally, our final deliverables are going to be to Dr. Sekulic, our sponsor, the Office of Accessibility Services, and the Global Experience Office.
In discussing accommodations, we have split our findings up into 2 major categories. The first of which being major accessibility concerns for WPI students looking to travel abroad, and the second being available accommodations at the Panama City Project Center, although it is important to note that there are some limitations within our findings.
Some common concerns for survey results from WPI students traveling abroad, as can be seen as a bar graph. Our top 3 are going to be housing accommodations, dietary needs, and language barriers.
As mentioned, the most prevalent concern was with housing accommodations. Of respondents who expressed any concerns, 50.9% stated that they felt unclear about the housing accommodations at their International Project Center. From our interviews, that idea was supported, and the 3 most mentioned accommodations were a single room, a private bathroom, and air conditioning. Fortunately, all 3 of these accommodations are available at the dormitories at Ciudad del Saber. Currently, there are no photos of the dormitories on the WPI eProjects website. This was something many survey respondents mentioned. They would like to see photos of their housing accommodations prior to travel. There are photos of the dormitories on the CDS Lodging Complex website, but this requires WPI students to navigate to a separate website to view those photos.
The next big concern was dietary needs, and thankfully in Panama, most dietary needs can be accommodated. This includes most diets and the big 9 food allergies from the FDA that you can see below. It is very easy to cater to a vegan, vegetarian, or pescatarian diet, both in Panama City and at Ciudad del Saber. And it's a little bit harder to accommodate a halal or kosher diet at Ciudad del Saber, but thankfully, due to the large population of both Jewish and Muslim communities, it is fairly simple to find either grocery stores or restaurants that can cater to either of these diets in the city.
The third most prevalent concern was language barriers. 19.4% of WPI students traveling abroad have put up their concerns. Language barriers can compound with dietary restrictions, as native English speakers in a Spanish-speaking country might have difficulties to convey their concerns for their diets, as well as their allergies. To aid this, there is a 3-day preparation course in Spanish at the Panama City Project Center at the Casco Antiguo Spanish School. Panama City has also a lot of English signage at tourist destinations as like the Biomuseo, as well as Panama Viejo, as well as Ciudad del Saber.
Several respondents felt uncertain about whether their identity and orientation would be accepted when going abroad, and WPI does provide this information on the eProject's website. However, many felt that it was difficult to find. So we have done some research on LGBTQ+ acceptance within Panama. Panama currently ranks a 42 out of 100, with 0 being the least accepting and 100 being the most accepting. And compared to the United States at 76, it is important to note, however, that these numbers can change as time goes on, and it does not mean that Panama is particularly unsafe for those looking to travel in the LGBTQ+ community, as spaces do exist for them within the city.
Moving on to students' worries about traveling with medications and the existence of healthcare at the project centers they are traveling to. In Panama, you can travel with most medications, both prescription and over-the-counter, that are available in the United States. And if you don't feel comfortable traveling with your medications, you can purchase most over-the-counter medications at the pharmacy located at La Plaza on the Ciudad del Saber campus. There is also important to note that you cannot bring medications like Claritin D, which contain an active ingredient that is banned in Panama, and this is in most other sinus medications, as well as any marijuana-based products. There is also an emergency clinic located on the Ciudad del Saber campus, and ambulance services are fairly easy to call.
Another major concern is mobility accommodations, but it's not talked frequently in our gathered data from our surveys and interviews. We see that any kind of wheelchair accessibility at dormitories in CDS may not be accessible for certain aspects. However, we do see campus accessibility efforts for ramps, accessible parking spaces, as well as Holiday Inn having an accessible room. We see accessibility efforts at beyond CDS in Panama City at most tourist destinations as Biomuseo, as well as Panama Viejo.
Accommodations were not cited as a major concern within our interviews or within our surveys. However, the OAS and the GEO do provide guidance to prospective advisors of project centers in order to find ways to transform academic accommodations to work within a project center setting in which they might not normally apply. These accommodations are usually handled within a group and between advisors and group mates so that everyone can have an equitable experience.
While we are very confident in what we found, we also want to acknowledge that there are certain limitations. The biggest of these for us was that we were only in Panama for 8 weeks, so we feel as though we couldn't broaden our scope as much as we would have liked to. We also had some issues pertaining to our survey results, where in our effort to maintain anonymity, we didn't have students log into the survey before they completed it, which resulted in them being allowed to submit multiple responses. This then meant we received over 700 responses, and we had to filter through those heavily to find the responses that actually had depth to them. And then finally, we reached out to a couple government agencies in Panama, and we unfortunately did not receive a response from any of them, which is understandable. And after that, we also took 4 weeks to find the correct personnel at Ciudad del Saber to speak to regarding accessibility on their campus. And this was due to both ours and their busy schedules, but ended up in us not being able to fully look into the information they provided us in their interview.
From our findings, we developed 4 major final deliverables. The primary one being the Panama City Project Center Accessibility Handbook. This is a 17-page document which we are providing to Dr. Sekulic, which outlines all of our major findings with regards to accommodations and alternatives that are available at this project center. We also have an infographic that we developed. You can see it on the screen here, containing major information about the project center and answering frequently asked questions. We recommend that this be distributed to students at the WPI Global Fair, which is an informational session that occurs prior to application for international projects. We also developed our allergen card, which can be seen on the screen as well. This has Spanish translations for the FDA's 9 major food allergens with the addition of gluten, as well as some common phrases to help students safely order food in Spanish. Finally, we have curated a collection of photographs of the Ciudad del Saber dormitories for publication on the WPI eProjects website. We would like to thank our sponsor, Dr. Aaron Sekulic, for providing this opportunity and for his continued guidance throughout the project. We would also like to thank our advisors, Dr. Grant Burrier and Dr. Kurt Davis, for their support and direction. And we would like to thank you all for attending this presentation. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Where did the idea for this?
So Dr. Sekulic is our sponsor for our project. I believe that similar accessibility related projects have occurred at a few other WPI project centers. And so his motivation was just that he felt sometimes he received questions from students about whether they could come to this project center with whatever their accommodations were. And he felt that he didn't have full answers to those questions, so he wanted to ensure that he was appropriately informing his students. Yes.
So for a lot of them, there were a bunch of people who indicated that they were freshmen at WPI and then that they had also completed their MQP abroad. And for those who don't know what an MQP is, it's a project that's completed in typically your senior year at WPI. So there are a bunch of ones that were like that it just couldn't be possible. So you knew they just clicked through and hit those ones. And then we also randomly received a lot of responses in different languages. Well, we were expecting most of them to be in English, as most WPI students only speak English. So we also were able to get rid of those ones, plus any duplicate that were the exact same responses all the way through. Any other questions?
For everybody in the future, somebody on the just asked before answering the question, please.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
From now.
Did you research other police centers and compare who stood there so years? Find the Panama Project Center less or more places?
Yes, we have seen a couple more project centers. The question was, have you researched about other project centers at WPI, specifically abroad? And I think, yes, we have researched about a couple of WPI project centers, which do have accessibility concerns or not. And we have found that the WPI project center at Worcester, UK is one of the best at inclusive and accessibility needs for mobility issues, as well as some visual impairments. And we do see an upward trend in inclusion and accessibility concerns at Ciudad del Saber, which is a really promising thing. We do see there can be more Ciudad del Saber can have more inclusiveness about some other impairments. So, however, there is a upward trend, so that's a really good thing.
Okay, our next group will be the backpackers.
Hello, everyone. We are the backpackers. We've been studying the connection between backpacking and finding purpose in life. We'd like to right up front give thanks to our advisors, Dr. Grant Burrier and Dr. Kurt Davis, and an extra thanks to Dr. Grant Burrier, who is also our sponsor. And thanks to Worcester Polytechnic Institute for giving us the opportunity to do this research.
And this is us. My name is Katie. I'm a computer science and mathematical sciences double major, and I'm a junior.
Hello, I'm Marina. I'm a senior in biology and biotechnology.
My name is Bryce. I am a junior studying robotics engineering and computer science.
And I'm Lucas. I'm a junior studying mechanical engineering.
Talking about our project, let us introduce a little bit about why we're doing this project. So in the modern world, it's often really easy to get stuck in this race that is life. There's so many pressures from society to go to school and get the highest GPA, and then graduate top of your class and go to the best college, and then get a great degree that gets you a top paying job, and then you get the next big promotion, and then you have to buy a perfect house with a perfect family with 2.5 kids and 2.5 cars, and all of that until you retire. So while many people feel that this is a great way to live, some people feel that it's too overwhelming and they just don't have enough time to slow down and focus on themselves and what they're really passionate about and what their purpose in life is.
So in order to understand purpose, we had to first define it. And for that, we looked to Ikigai, which is a Japanese concept that loosely translates to one's reason for being, living. And it is a culmination of 4 different aspects of life summed up into one thing that they can apply to life and live their life that way. And we also had to find how people follow this purpose throughout life. And through our research, we found that it often starts with someone becoming inspired by someone or something, and then they identify their purpose and acquire the skills to carry out this purpose and transfer the skills to either other people or other aspects in their own life. And we use backpacking in order to find how people find their purpose, because backpacking has a lot of challenges that people have to overcome, whether it be physical or mental. And with these challenges, if they can become overcome, they reap the benefits. And the main benefit from backpacking is self-improvement. These people find an introspective element to backpacking, which helps them understand their own way of emotionally and mentally dealing with the world around them. And additionally, we were backpacking in Panama, and Panama has a huge tourism aspect to it, as well as a huge backpacking aspect. And we used specifically the book Lonely Planet in Panama, which is a backpacker's guidebook. It shows all about the information of what you can explore in Panama through the beaches and the rainforests and the biodiversity, as well as the social aspects of Panama, where in a lot of towns, backpackers culminate, and it shows a very big nightlife. And these hostels are overrun with backpackers, and you can find a lot of social people there.
So as we began our research and as we conducted it, the question we were trying to answer was, does backpacking help individuals to find a purpose?
In order to accomplish this, we broke our work into 3 different sections. First and foremost, we had our archival research. This was done both prior to and during our time here in Panama. And next, we took that information that we found from a variety of research as well as books and compared it against lived experience of backpackers through interviews and surveys. Unfortunately, our surveys didn't get the response that we were hoping for, but our interviews were fundamental in having a thorough understanding of what the true backpacking experience was like. Finally, we compared this against our own experience as we went on our own journey for about a week and recorded ethnographic data along the way. So first and foremost, looking at what backpackers view purpose as. Well, they largely agree with most researchers when it comes to the definition of purpose, which is that it's something that brings people joy. It's a way of using a person's skills to give back to both their community and the larger world. And additionally, it's something that will add fulfillment to various aspects of their life, whether this be personal, career, spiritual, or communal. Interestingly, they seem to disagree with many of the researchers when it comes to the ways in which one finds purpose. Particularly, a lot of researchers seem to think that there is a single purpose moving forward through the entirety of your life, while backpackers seem to believe that it's something that changes throughout the course of your life. One such backpacker, at the time that we met him, found purpose through teaching children how to play basketball, something really simple and local to the area. But prior to that, he had been a chef in a completely different part of the country. Additionally, the question of whether or not purpose is something necessary for a happy life was also brought up. In particular, one backpacker we spoke with compared whether it was something that was self-determined or something that was predetermined, bringing up ideas of spirituality and whether it was as important if it wasn't something that you defined for yourself.
Now, the reason that people decided to backpack is as varied as those people themselves. Some grew up with it, spending their childhood exploring other countries, either with their family or with friends. Some were introduced to it through magazines, such as National Geographic, or seeing fantastical places in pop culture, in TV shows, or in movies, and deciding that they wanted to go out and experience those things for themselves, to meet those people, and to build upon their own repertoire of knowledge. For some others, it was more of an introspective thing. It was about learning about themselves by going out and experiencing new things in the world, which could then reflect upon themselves. One interesting person we spoke to had spent the last 3 years serving in the army, and they decided to go out and backpack because they really didn't know what they wanted to do in their life after they got out of the army. And they chose to go out to experience, to try to find a purpose, find a passion, or just find out more what was important to them. Finally, some people wanted to backpack for a change of scenery, to get out of the city or get out of wherever they were, to find new experiences and just escape where they had been in that monotonous status quo.
We found that traveling in groups and traveling alone are 2 very different experiences, but both very meaningful. Traveling in groups allows backpackers to form deeper connections and deeper bonds within the group because they spend a lot of time together and they have a lot of time to talk about everything. One example of that is actually our own ethnography. The 4 of us, we spent a lot of time together, and there was some nights that we were just out on a balcony in one of the hostels, and we were just playing games and eating food and just talking about everything. And we definitely learned a lot more about each other, and we grew a lot closer. However, on the other hand, traveling alone forces you to go out of your comfort zone and talk to other people, other backpackers, other locals that you meet in the travels. And it forces these backpackers to listen, not forces, but it helps them listen to these stories that they tell them and learn about them and maybe even reflect it to their own life. It also gives backpackers a lot of alone time and quiet time to just sit back and reflect and think about their past life and maybe think about their future and what they might want to do, which causes a lot of growth.
As for the impacts of backpacking, one thing that consistently came up as we spoke to people, whether it was local Panamanians or people traveling into the country, was the effect that backpacking and tourism as a whole has on local communities. The consensus that we generally heard was that backpacking can greatly boost an area's economy, bring money in as people spend money in their hostels, restaurants, and activities. However, it can have a very negative impact on the environment, identity, and infrastructure in the areas that they visit. One of the most interesting places we went during our ethnography was a small town called Pedasi, which shifted a lot to have a tourist-centric economy. And then when COVID hit, that money, those tourists, all of a sudden went away. And so when we arrived, a lot of the restaurants were closed, the hostels were empty. The massive, beautiful beaches had barely anyone on them. In fact, as you can see in this photo, at nighttime, the entire town felt almost abandoned. It was eerie. And this can show the effects that backpacking can have on those local communities.
We found that there were a lot of impacts on personal growth as well. One of them is general self-efficacy. One skill that we found that backpackers gained a lot from their backpacking experiences was independence. On a lot of trips, backpackers start off not knowing what to do. They don't know where to go, what decisions to make, but then eventually being out there, and especially when you're alone, it forces them to get that independence, make these decisions. Another thing we found was backpackers got a more go with the flow mentality, because you can't really predict what's going to happen on a backpacking trip. You can suddenly get sick, maybe something goes wrong, something changes. And instead of being angry and worrying about that, most backpackers that we talked to said that it gave them a more go with the flow mentality and just accepting things the way they are. The next is mental health. Speaking of these challenges can have a pretty bad mental toll on mental health, because things just don't go the way you expect. So it just adds a lot of stress, and it could be a bad thing, but then it could also be a good thing, because when people actually overcome these challenges and they're able to accomplish this, they have more confidence in their abilities, and they know that they can do it. And so their self-esteem gets boosted and their mental health improves. And last but not least, the big question, does backpacking affect purpose? We got mixed reviews on this one. Some people said that they did find purpose through backpacking. Some people found it on their adventures when they saw something that interested them. For example, someone we talked to said that they got interested in how tourism affects communities, and so they started researching that. Other people found their purpose through talking to people and learning about their stories, while some people found purpose in backpacking itself. Those that didn't find purpose, though, felt that they still had a lot of time to reflect and think about their own lives and maybe be pushed towards something bigger. So overall, even if backpacking did not have an effect on purpose, it still had a lot of great impacts.
For our own experience backpacking, we started here in Panama City, traveled to the pristine beach town of Pedasi, then enjoyed the cool mountains of Boquete, and finally finished at the booming tourism hotspot that is Bocas del Toro. Along the way, we had a lot of hardship, whether it was trying to figure out new transportation plans in a language that we hardly know, or getting ill, which two of us came down with illnesses.
This whole route
Pushing that last step on a difficult hike. But at the end of the day, we all agree that it was worth it, because we had some experience that was completely unforgettable, whether it was standing atop a mountain, two oceans at the same time, or enjoying a little serene moment on a beach completely secluded from civilization. At the end of it, we may not have found purpose, but we definitely learned more about ourselves during this one short week than we had during the rest of the trip.
As for our recommendations, for future projects, we recommend to expand the range of surveys and interviews. We spent a lot of time, of course, here in Panama City, and all of the surveys that we gave out were to local hostels. we recommend that people try to get to maybe off the beaten path areas, places less tourist centric with smaller hostel communities and different backpacker experiences. As well, conduct research in new locations. We did research here, of course, here in Panama, and a previous project did a project research this in Taiwan. However, there are still a lot of areas of the globe which have not been looked at and which could have different outcomes. Finally, we found out actually a lot inadvertently about the impacts of backpacking and tourism on local communities, which could be a very interesting project in the future. As for backpackers, prioritize individual travel. It is a very different experience, was the consensus that we got from all of our backpackers. It kind of amplifies all of the benefits you get from normal backpacking. It teaches you to be more independent, to rely more upon yourself, and in doing so, teaches you more about yourself. Finally, do challenging things. Test yourself, go out of your way, do things that you wouldn't normally do, that you don't think you're capable of, because you will discover you are able to do so much more than you believe. Thank you all so much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
No one. Any questions? That is right outside the entrance to Las Tres Cascadas. It is known in English as the Lost Waterfalls in Boquete.
What's the average age of the people that survey? And if they were young people, do the young people think that after the experience they will change their role or whatever for school?
The question was, what is the average age of the people that we backpacked? And if they were young, were they still planning to go to school with them? Yeah, the university or anything like that. So the youngest person that we interviewed was 23. The oldest was, I believe, 66. So it was a very large range, and we had people all throughout that. Generally on the lower end, I think the majority were between probably around 28 to 40. And for the people that we did interview who were younger, they had already gone to university. We didn't find anyone on the trail who had not gone yet. Yes.
How would you generally describe the backpacker community when you showed up at these hostels, when people were kind of milling around? Were people interested in your project? Did they want to talk to you? Were they approachable?
So the question was, what were these backpacker communities like at hostels? Were we approachable? Were they kind? I would say yes. I would say most people. It also depended on the location, but in Boquete and Bocas, everyone was out, everyone was socializing, and we met new people every day. And sometimes we didn't really have the time to ask them for an interview because they were going on their hikes and busy schedules, but we would just sit down at a table and talk with them for 30-40 minutes. And the people that did have time were, I would say, 90% of the time open for an interview or a longer discussion.
Can I have one?
Yeah.
Additionally, while I was ill and I was stuck at the hostel we were staying at the time, I wound up meeting an entire group of people that had just come to the hostel that day. And over dinner, we all discussed backpacking and purpose. Like, I brought up the project and everyone was immediately interested, and it sparked a discussion. It was a great experience. Any other questions? Thank you all so much.
Oh, for time, I gotta set myself as the host.
Okay, and so on deck, joining us shortly will be the biofiltration team, which will take us to a whole other part of the country, the western province of Chiriquí, and I see Edmundo waving. Hello, Edmundo.
Hey, there he is.
Hello guys, how are you?
He's saying hi.
You think that I lost? No, I'm here.
He's saying hi and he loves us. It's kind of
Yes, how is this working?
How are you? Good evening.
but it's still.
I cannot minimize Zoom when I'm recording the meeting. That's gonna make that, so that was backpackers,
I was just saying.
gray water. Big in it. Sorry, I had to come up and a bunch of people joined that were not muted. But now I can do it on my phone, so.
Stunning.
Okay. All right, without further ado, biofiltration.
Oh, you're good.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're the Greywater Biofiltration Team partnering with Otama University and the Batipa Field Station.
There you go.
I'm Spencer Harding. I'm studying electrical and computer engineering, and I'm from Westfield, New Jersey.
I'm Caitlin Harrington. I'm a mechanical engineering student from Nashua, New Hampshire.
I'm Wyatt Harris. I'm a robotics engineering student from Belmont, Massachusetts.
And I'm Jessica Rhodes, a robotics engineering student from Washington Township, New Jersey.
I'm Jack Weinstein, a computer science student from Kaneohe, Hawaii.
So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is water, specifically in this beautiful country of Panama. Panama has two seasons, the wet season and the dry season. The wet season is from May to December and the dry from December to May. There's not much of a change in temperature, solely the amount of rain being poured down every single day. We are currently in the rainy season, if you guys didn't know, by it raining every day. However, Panama has seen a significant decrease in rainfall of 47% over the first 5 months of 2023, specifically in the area surrounding the canal, so the canal zone. And that 47% is very significant as Panama consumes 2.5 times the national average of water. So if the rainfall is cut in almost half, that is a lot of water that they are now not seeing that they're supposed to be using. Of that water, 67% of it is used for domestic purposes, 28% is used agriculturally, and 5% is used in industry. So a lot of the water that is being used in Panama is used by everyday people in their homes. Our sponsor is Otama University of Technology, and their mission statement is formar profesionales líderes, emprendedores y comprometidos con el desarrollo humano y sostenible del país. And their subsidiary is the Batipa Field Research Station, which is where we did our work for the past 8 weeks. The Batipa Field Station is located on the Batipa Peninsula, right outside of David in the GDP province of Panama, and it sits on 2,000 hectares of land. It has an abundance of beautiful wildlife, including these rare birds and monkeys that do like to throw poop at you. And the 2,000 hectares of land are split into 3 major purposes: 1,000 for teak production and farming, 600 for wildlife preserves, and 400 for pasture and bovine. So that's a very large percentage that is designated for teak and wildlife preserves. We are working specifically with gray water. Gray water is wastewater that has not been contaminated with human excretion. So that is not water from toilets, and that is not black water without solid waste. Black water is water from toilets. This is water from like a bathtub or a shower, a washing machine, or a sink.
So in terms of safety, the reuse of gray water is not strictly regulated or advised against. However, the reuse of black water has many regulations because if improperly filtered, it can lead to the spread of dangerous pathogens and diseases. Because of this, our sponsor encourages us to look into biofiltration as a method to safely and accessibly filter gray water. Biofiltration uses plants and microbes to filter water instead of chemical or ultraviolet treatment. Organic materials are used to filter out solids and also to grow biofilm. Biofilm are colonies of bacteria that can consume contaminants. Over time, between weeks and months, the biofilm will adapt to consume the contaminants that are most commonly passed through the filter.
Project had 3 major goals presented to us. The first, to understand the water needs of the local people in the GDP province of Western Panama, as well as to create a device that is capable of filtering gray water. Our sponsor's liaison presented to us biofiltration, which is what we ended up working with. And the third and very important part is making sure it follows the principles of appropriate technology.
Appropriate technology is a movement that has its roots in a lot of different places, but the term was first coined by economist E.F. Schumacher in the late 1960s. The main goal of the appropriate technology movement is to make the transfer of technology from more developed to less developed places effective by incorporating the local culture and making sure that everything that is built
for the technology is locally sourced and understood and recreatable by people in the area.
In order to ensure that we could create a design that is appropriate technology for rural Panama, we looked at multiple different biofiltration solutions. That way, when we arrived at BFS, we could evaluate the problem and choose the best one. The first design we looked at here is a bucket filter, which is a bucket with layers of materials that will filter the water. In this example, we have gravel, sand, and charcoal, but materials such as terracotta, wood chips, and more are also effective. Our second design is a planter bed, which can be used in addition to the first design to make a multi-stage filter. The planter bed is a box filled with soil and plants, and the soil is loose enough that water passes through the soil and leaves contaminants behind. Additionally, the growth of the plants uptakes more integrated chemicals in order to further filter the water. This means that plants that grow faster, such as native plants, are very effective for this. Our third design uses anaerobic and aerobic chambers to filter both gray water and black water. And our final design we look into, floating islands, are constructed islands with plants that float in larger bodies of water, such as ponds or lakes, to filter those ponds or lakes.
We had a couple different methods for researching our project. The first one was archival research. This is when we looked into peer-reviewed sources about gray water, biofiltration, different types of wastewater, and regulatory sources on how it should be handled safely. And these really form the backbone of our design, making sure that everything we design and recommend is scientifically understood and well-backed. Then we have our ethnography. This is when we went out into the field. We had the great opportunity to spend 2 weeks working at the Batipa field station with our sponsor. And this gave us a great look into the culture of Western Panama, along with just some things that we can't find through archival research. I think a great example of this is the tools at the Batipa field station. We went there and we realized that they would have no power tools, including like a handheld battery powered drill. That's something that in the United States would be pretty common, but out there it's not. And even though, there's a possibility of bias within ethnography because we didn't see a super wide range of places, it gives us information that we couldn't find anywhere else. Finally, interviews. Our interviews had two main goals. The first one was to ask residents of the Chiriquí province what they thought about our design, including if other people would build it and if it fit with their current systems. And then we also asked professionals in the field to see if they had advice on our design or if they believed it would be effective.
1 week after arriving in Panama, our group traveled to the city of David to meet with our sponsor at Otema University. Our liaison to Otema, Edmundo Gonzalez, showed us around David at various hardware stores and small locally owned stores so we could get a good idea of what resources were available to the locals in the Chiriquí province, as well as the cost of those resources. We also spent time surveying the site conditions at the Batipa field station and their current wastewater system. Working with Edmundo, we determined that our multi-stage design using the bucket filter and planter bed would be the most effective for cost affordability and replication in the area. We designed our system to meet the water needs of a typical 5-family home in Western Panama. And you can see in our design uses a tank to hold the gray water, which flows into a bucket filter that removes the large contaminants in the water. We used materials found at the Batipa field station and locally found on farms nearby, such as gravel, terracotta, sand, and biochar. After going through the bucket, the water flows into the planter bed with gravel to disperse the water and for biofilm to accumulate on both the gravel and the roots of the plants. And here you can see we also created a 3D model for our design. After completing the design, we began the construction process, and we first started by collecting available materials. Here Edmundo is showing us how on their teak plantations, they burn wood to help fertilize the soil, and that this is a common practice on farms. We were able to collect biochar for the first layer in the filter bucket, as you can see there. And we also collected gravel from the driveway and old pieces of terracotta roofing that were broken into chunks, and then sand as well from the nearby beaches. Additionally, we created an educational model in this water jug so that when the Petipa Field Station shows off our design to local farmers in the area for replication, they can see the layers that are inside the bucket filter, on the bottom being biochar, then sand, terracotta, and gravel. After creating the bucket filter, we moved on to the planter bed. We were assisted by a couple of BFS employees who helped us dig the hole for the planter bed, as well as a trench to make sure that rainwater coming down the hill did not contaminate the system. We used cinder blocks to create a structural wall so that contaminants from the outside did not get into the system. And to ensure that water stays in the system, we used a waterproof tarp and a layer of cardboard, which allowed us to then add our layers of gravel on either side to disperse the water when going in and out of the system. We used what we had available to us and fashioned a sock to the outlet pipe to prevent large pollutants from exiting the system, and created a channel for the water to be returned into the environment cleaner or to be collected for irrigation of crops. After this, we added the sand and soil mixture to the planter bed. It's important to note that we used 2 parts of sand for every 1 part of soil, as we found the soil in this area and the surrounding areas to have a high concentration of clay. This is important to allow the water, as described earlier, to flow through the system, going through the plant roots and coming out the other side. Once the planter bed was completed, we connected our bucket filter and holding tank to the system. And you can see the final design here, where water can be stored in the tank, eventually connected to a household or gray water system, flowing into the bucket to collect large contaminants, and into the planter bed, where biofilm and the roots of the plants can consume a lot of those more integrated pollutants.
So throughout the past 7 weeks, we had the opportunity to interview 3 individuals: Lucas Hun, Alhameda, and Cesar Gonzalez. Lucas Hun and Alhameda are both professionals in the water protection field and provided us with a list of recommendations for future iterations. First, we were told that we should alter the surge tank. It should be larger to prevent leaking and allow the water to sit for at least 1 hour to filter out solids, grease, and fat before the filtration process. We were also told that we should add a pre-treatment system or wash the mesh screen once a week to prevent clogging. For long-term maintenance, we should change out the filter media in the filter bucket at least every 6 months. We were also told that we need to maintain continuous water flow, and the system must be oxygenated so that the plants in the biofilm can survive. Finally, we were advised to name parameters to test the quality of water before and after filtration. Due to time constraints, we were unable to send samples to a lab, but if we could, we would test pH, turbidity, total suspended solids, biochemical oxygen demand, chemical oxygen demand, and total organic carbon. Ensuring we utilize appropriate technology is also essential in the replication process of this design. So we spoke with Cesar Gonzalez, an expert on the area of Boquete. He grew up on a coffee farm and now works as a tour guide. He started by describing their current system. So most homes in Boquete have a formal septic system, and they're currently implementing a chemical purification plant. However, in surrounding areas, people often use latrines, and they dispose of their wastewater in large ditches directly into the ground. Many in this area also have not received a formal education, so it is important to provide an in-depth explanation of the positive environmental impact of water filtration. This will greatly influence them to replicate this design. Some may not have the time or money for replication, but most would be enthusiastic about the idea as long as they are aware of the long-term benefits. Cesar also said that all of the chosen materials were readily available, and he even believes that greenhouses would be willing to donate materials such as plastic and PVC, both of which were included in our budget. Overall, there are some changes that should be made for future iterations, but we've received a very positive response from this design.
We would like to end by stating we truly believe that our creation of this accessive technology can truly benefit Panama and keep this country, the world's most biologically diverse country, beautiful and clean. We would like to end off by thanking our sponsor liaison, Edmundo Gonzalez, as well as our 2 project advisors, Dr. Kurt Davis and Dr. Grant Burrier, for all they have done and all of their support. We have truly loved it here, and we'd also like to thank WPI for allowing us this opportunity. Thank you very much.
How much was the prototype?
The prototype ended off costing $127, $130 for all of the material that we did not pay for any of the actual filter material. So we didn't pay for the gravel, the sand, the dirt, the terracotta, or anything. Everything was found locally. The only things we were paying for were the plastic tarps. The cinder blocks were the most expensive, and as well as like the 5-gallon buckets. However, if someone's recreating this in their own home, theoretically, they can have some of this stuff already just in their closet. I would not be shocked if someone has a random 5-gallon bucket laying around. Any other questions?
Did you say that you were going to test the water for total suspended solids?
Yes.
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. Do you wanna, the question was, she asked if we were gonna be testing the water for total suspended solids, and I said yes. Any other questions? I saw a hand over here earlier. No? Yes?
This system would in theory be appropriate household 5 people.
Yes. Yeah, so the question was, this system would be appropriate for a household of 5 people, which is yes.
I just wanted to clarify that we designed that for a home out in Cherokee, so that would be a 5-family home and not using washing machines. Because that's not typical out there.
One of the benefits of this design, though, is that it can be easily scaled with a larger bucket filter and planter bed.
And what's the last question?
How long did it take to design the entire system?
The question was, how long did it take to design the entire system and how many people we had working on it? So you're saying physically build or?
Yeah.
Okay, so physically build the system like
So wait.
less than a week probably. In total building time, I'd say 2.5 days. And it was the 5 of us, as well as we had assistance from 3 other people who work at the Patipa Field Station who were assisting us. They assisted us by digging a hole as well as carrying massive loads of sand and gravel from nearby areas so we could set up our planter bed. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, so the question was, are there materials that are like in soaps or detergents that are not compliant to the design?
The answer is yes. Gray water is one of those things where depending on the product that you use in your household, it can vary greatly. We discussed this more in our paper, but if someone was to implement this design, they would have to be a little careful about the types of products they use and, you know, making sure if they use like heavy amounts of cleaning products, maybe not put it down the drain.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Next up, we will have our climate change crew, AKA the Equivadas. I will say.
Thank you.
We are doing an amazing job of doing more or less to the schedule.
Mess it up.
Well done. Yeah, I just jinxed us. Okay, without further ado, climate change.
Hi, everyone. I'm Benjamin Brooks.
Jason Casey.
I'm Jewel Polly.
I'm Elliot Trilling.
And my name is Olivia Holmel. We have worked on the project Storing Climate Change in Panama, which has been sponsored by Professor Ingrid Shockey. This project contributes to Storing Climate Change, an ongoing research endeavor in which other student groups from Worcester Polytechnic Institute have traveled to many countries across the globe. These countries include places such as Australia, China, India, London, the United States, and more. However, this project has never been conducted in Latin America.
The goal of our project was to conduct and record a series of interviews from Panamanians regarding their experiences with climate change. We then took these clips and produced a short documentary, which we will show you shortly. However, before we do so, we would like to thank our sponsor, Ingrid Shockey, as well as our advisors, Grant Verrier and Kurt Davis.
To clarify, this is just the introduction.
Welcome to Panama, a nation of breathtaking beauty and rich biodiversity. Panama's natural wonders extend from endless rainforest He will allow to persist in conditions where their energy product. The pandemic, a month more than anything, and has global leadership, and has been accepted and has global significance. And culture. I think you will do that, and I'm not being climate change. Residents, what ones, the rising sea levels are now part of everyday life for many families. Climate change is altering their world, putting their homes, livelihoods, and culture at risk. Our role in this documentary is to record the personal stories of families and to listen to their experience. Their voices are vital to understand the human impact of this global crisis. This documentary challenges they confront and the resilience they display. The urgency of addressing climate change and emphasize the need for action.
To understand the context of our narratives, we performed an in-depth literature review. First, let's begin with an overview on climate change. Climate change is defined by the United Nations as long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. While these changes can occur naturally, it is widely recognized that recent human activity is the primary cause of climate change. Although Panama is not a top contributor to global emissions, they are especially vulnerable due to their geographical location.
Panama is one of the most biologically diverse places on Earth, ranked 22nd among all countries in biodiversity. Panama is often referred to as the Mesoamerican biological corridor because of the exchange of many species of flora and fauna between North and South America, making Panama a pivotal link in the biological exchange. Panama has 40 forests are 60.4% of Panama's land and are a big part of ensuring the blossoming biodiversity of Panama. Forests provide water security, habitat, and carbon offsets, but have been threatened in recent years due to the expansion of economic and industrial sectors.
Extreme weather events are defined as periods of unusually impactful weather occurrences. These events have become more frequent and more fierce due to the impacts of climate change. These include droughts, which can cripple farmers, floods, which can destroy homes, and sea level rise, which can remove entire islands and destroy communities.
So because of these extreme weather events and unsustainable infrastructural expansion, Panama has put into place some policies that help the country adapt and mitigate climate change. So some of these include nature's right to exist, and Panama is now in the process of moving towards a circular economy and introducing more sustainable practices, especially in the tourism, agricultural, and fishing sectors in order to increase resilience within Panama.
Next, we would like to walk you through how we completed our project. First, before arriving to Panama, we conducted archival research to get a feel of the culture, as well as to find out locations in which we wanted to conduct interviews. Once we arrived in Panama, we conducted these interviews, which was the brunt of our project, as our documentary is almost solely based off these interviews. And we traveled to different areas around Panama to gather indicators, to record climate indicators, and you will also see those as B-roll within our documentary. And we stayed in Panama for 7 weeks to get a feel of the culture. And last weekend, we stayed with the Embera indigenous community to also get a feel of their culture as well.
Recording interviews was an essential piece of our project. We sent out roughly 50 emails to experts, although most of our interviewees came from the snowball sampling method, which is when interviewees would recommend us other participants. We approached the public at places like Costco and Tigo. We reached out to local vendors there, and we also had semi-structured interviews So for our Spanish interviews, due to the language barrier, they were more structured. And then for our English interviews, they were less structured and more open-ended. And then here's a picture of our team and how we reached out to different groups.
So after conducting our interviews, we had to, of course, analyze our clips, and we began by first improving the audio and generating transcripts through artificial intelligence. And then we watched the interview clips and timestamped them based off of, and we timestamped certain clips we enjoyed, and we also coded them based off of keywords. And then we used those snippets to generate a story outline. And so next you'll see an example of how we coded our interviews. And each row is a timestamp section. Vertically, that section column is the keyword which we coded by.
Once we had timestamped and coded, we generated an outline that we wanted the documentary to follow. Here's a little snippet of what it looks like. With this outline in hand, we went about cutting together clips. We used DaVinci Resolve, a free video editing software, and we cut these clips together into our final documentary, as well as adding transitions and producing the intro sequence that you just saw.
So after conducting our data collection, we put together a map that illustrates some of the main themes and sub-themes that we found through our interviews, as well as some recommendations that came out of them. Regarding the perceptions of climate change, many of our experts had confirmed the definitions and causes of it. However, some locals that we spoke to actually had some religious undertones when speaking on this subject. In addition to this, while people did acknowledge that carbon emissions were an issue, people also addressed pollution and mining as other contributors to the climate crisis as well.
One consistency among all demographics was their ability to recognize changes in the environment. The most frequently reported change was hotter temperatures. However, they also mentioned stuff like sea level rising, droughts, floods, and these were from both locals and experts such as Vicente Del Cid, a researcher at Marviva.
In addition to the environmental effects, many of our interviewees mentioned both physical and mental effects that they had experienced due to climate change. Pictured here is Dwig Di Valiente, who told us about how he became depressed and even suicidal after learning about the effects climate change was having on his community.
We also spoke to Panamanians who lost their homes due to floods, such as Cesar Barilla, a teacher who lives in Chapo. We also found evidence for homes being removed due to indigenous homes being removed due to rising sea levels.
One question we asked our interviewees was who they thought were the most vulnerable peoples. And one group they mentioned were coastal communities due to the rising sea levels, as well as increased frequency of flooding. And they also mentioned poor communities as well as indigenous communities due to their lack of available resources. Picture here is Stephen Patton from Stry University, from Stry Research, from the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, who gave us an expert background on some of these issues.
One of these resources is access to proper information regarding climate change, which has led to the use of unsustainable practices with little to no knowledge of the consequences that they might produce. This theme is seen in the political and governmental climate of Panama.
A common theme that we saw in many of our interviews was the lack of implementation of the many climate policies that Panama has. Some people even mentioned that the government would often overlook illegal environmental practices due to the economic benefits that they had, specifically for underprivileged people within Panama.
We also found evidence that shows the economy has been affected from climate change. We spoke with Iya Espino de Marota, the Deputy Administrator at the Panama Canal Authority, who talked to us about how the canal's reservoirs have been affected through droughts. And because of this, the number of ships that can pass the canal has been reduced, as a result having effect on the economy, not only for the canal, but for the country of Panama as a whole.
In addition to this, the destruction of land, biodiversity, as well as the increased risk to human life
has placed significant stress specifically on agricultural, fishing, and tourism sectors as well.
With these effects being felt and lived by the people of Panama, there was a strong call for change and an urgency in this demand. Many people advocated for the voices of underrepresented groups, specifically Indigenous and youth groups, to be amplified. Many people identified these groups as the key to the future survival of this planet.
And so we also developed recommendations divided into 3 groups: future teams, Panamanians, and the global populations.
For future teams that are looking to conduct this project or those similar, we first suggest to expand the geological location in order to get a broader perspective from the country that you are in. In order to do this, you must plan trips and manage your time effectively. Our last recommendation is to always be cognizant of the population you're interviewing, acknowledging the cultures and traditions of whatever country you are in.
Some of the recommendations that we had for Panamanians was to actually enforce the laws that are currently in place, and to do that by increasing climate education so people can make informed decisions, and also reviewing and implementing proper land use by creating better infrastructure, and encouraging sustainable practices as well, specifically recycling.
Our final set of recommendations is for the global population, the first of which is to acknowledge the disparity in global emissions. So the graph to the right, as you can see, Panama has a much lower emissions per capita than somewhere like the United States. However, they are still feeling the effects from us. The second of which is to discourage environmentally unfriendly practices. And then the last recommendation that we have is to amplify unheard and vulnerable voices. This was essential to our the project goal, which was to empower voices through storytelling.
By doing this project, we've gained a small glimpse into the plight that many Panamanians are facing due to climate change. We hope that our documentary will help to inspire awareness and as well highlight the importance of the individual when discussing climate change. We'd like to share one last quick quote from one of our interviewees, Juan Monterrey.
There are references, figure references, and thank you very much. Are there any questions?
You get to see the movie?
There will be a link that we can send out to anyone that is interested. It will be linked on YouTube.
Are all the clips in that intro yours, but curious about the one that allocates what
So he asked if all the clips in the intro and the videos that we've shown were ours. And most of the clips, yes, the clips from the flooding were actually taken by the people in Chapo that experienced the flood. They have shared these clips with us, and the only other clips in our documentary, full video, that are not ours are clips from the fish market, which we've gathered from local fishermen who provided us with these. Any other questions? Yes.
When is the documentary live? So we can watch the full thing.
So they asked when the documentary will be live. By the end of this week, either Thursday or Friday, we should be done with the documentary and it should be turned in and available to watch. It is a bit long, but lots of good info in there and information.
About 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And the audio is better than it sounds in this room.
Yes, it is.
That's a good question. Oh, can you repeat your question?
No, you.
No, can I hear it again? Yeah, so I can repeat it. So why aren't other major countries helping Panama, considering Panama is a big point of trade? That's a good question that, in all honesty, I don't think we have a true answer of, but I do want to say that we spoke to indigenous people as well as some other locals who said that change doesn't happen unless it affects the money. So a lot of times you're not necessarily hearing the effects of people flooding, and really the government isn't going to do anything until they're losing out on their money.
I think we're gonna say the same point. Another interesting thing that our team researched was the fact of climate justice, which goes over disparities that of the impacts of environment and climatic issues. And these are often felt by underrepresented populations. And the reason that it's felt more by these underrepresented populations is very much so underlying, whether it be racial issues or poverty level and stuff like that. So it's a bigger societal issue than just environment.
Interview teachers, I think professor at university, how they teach this issue of climate change, especially to small kids, how the kids react to this reality.
So they asked how teachers are able to teach this topic in school and how they approach this reality. And we talked to many people about this fact. A lot of the teachers say they try, specifically at the Technological University of Panama, they try to incorporate into their things and classes, and anybody who is against climate change and false information, they try to immediately correct them by showing them facts and figures and statistics. And that's why our project is so important, by showing a different side of climate change information, by showing the stories and narratives that are shown in them. But there's also a problem with climate change education at the lower level, because the potential mental health effects that it may incite. One of our interviewees actually, I remember him saying, how can you tell elementary school kids that your world is going to crap? You tell middle school kids your world is going to crap. You're telling high school kids the world is going to crap. How are they not going to be depressed and have climate related anxiety? So it's a double-edged sword, but it's very important to make sure that everybody is educated on these issues. Any other questions?
Any of you had experience in documentary filmmaking in the past? So how did it inform? It seemed like you were very methodical and quoting the clips and organizing them.
So the question is if we had any experience with documentary making in the past. I personally did not.
My teacher practicum, or humanities practicum, was about filmmaking, so I was able to advise a few of our group members who picked it up really fast, and then were able to take the methods that I showed them and make it their own, and did not require a lot of oversight from these guys. Any other questions?
Who's next?
MQP. All right, we will be returning to the wonderful province of Chiriquí and El Mundo de El Mundo. All right, we're hitting the home stretch here, but let's return to Batipa and learn about a boardwalk over the Manglares.
Wait, Grant, how can we see ourselves so we can move this a little bit? What? All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to tell you a little bit about our senior capstone presentation, which is the Batipa Boardwalk. Oh dear. right, quick little meet the team with some pictures of our time in Panama. My name is Deidre. I'm a senior in civil engineering, and this is a picture of me getting this indigenous artwork done on my arm.
Hello, my name is Luke. I'm a senior civil engineering student too, and here I am on a force in Boquete.
Hello, my name is Lenny, and that's me constructing one of our prototypes.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a senior environmental engineering student, and this is me at the Finca Flower Preserve in Chitty.
Hello, my name is Tim, and I'm a senior civil engineering student. This picture behind me is me at the Panama Canal.
Our project sponsor for our time in Panama was Otema Technological University. They are a private institution located in David, and they have a strong emphasis on sharing the importance and value of the environment through understanding more about it. In our time here in Panama, we spent 2 weeks with them and got to see many of Panama's beauties, emphasizing this point. One way they go and learn more about the environment is through Patipa Field Institute, which is a satellite campus of theirs in the peninsula of Patipa. That peninsula has some preserved areas where they go and study learn more about, one of which includes the mangrove ecosystems unique to Panama. And given the complex nature of mangroves, it's very hard to conduct research on them in an accessible fashion. So a structure was desired from the sponsor to go and easier access these hard to reach mangroves.
So as Luke said, the sponsor wanted us to build some sort of walkway to go out into the mangroves. And we decided on boardwalk, as that would help accomplish their goal of having not only their own students and researchers be able to access the ecosystem, but also open it to ecotourists so they could then teach about the environmental benefits of mangrove ecosystems, such as water purification. And it works as a hatching area and spawning area for a lot of marine creatures. So it is a very important ecosystem.
So with all that in mind, we have a bit of a project outline here with some objectives to help us through our project. The first one was a site assessment, getting into the mangrove swamp itself, kind of identifying some of the external parameters that would affect the boardwalk. The second objective was a literature review based on some of the geotechnical uncertainties that we found in the first objective, as well as other aspects that contribute to our boardwalk, including member connections, material properties, things like that. Objective 3 was building some prototypes to kind of understand constructability. And finally, all those objectives combined in order to get the information to design our final boardwalk.
All right, so in order to understand the terrain that we were dealing with in our final design, we first had to go out and assess the site. So we conducted several site visits over the course of several days. And during some of these, we got to see the terrain at both high and low tide, as is demonstrated in the pictures behind me. We also used our phone GPS to locate this geographically, and our GPS got some coordinates. We identified various hazards that were in these swamps, whether that be mangrove roots or simply being able to access it in the first place. There's a drop of 8 or so feet. We also conducted this sophisticated test called the stick test, where we took a stick and shoved it in the ground to see how much of that squishy dirt layer there was. Finally, we used the LiDAR technology on the iPhone to scan the terrain, both the swamp and the pathway leading to it. And we were able to develop a 3D model, which we eventually turned into a topography map, which you'll see in a second. So up here, this is a topography map of the site. This right here is the walkway I was talking about. The mangrove areas up there, see those are trees up there. The orange outline right here is essentially the site limits. That's the area that might be disturbed during the construction process, kind of like some outer boundaries. And this red bit right here is the proposed location of the boardwalk, which would be about 45 feet or so. And it takes you right to this big cluster of mangroves right here, which was the goal, the target.
So from the site assessment, we learned more about what we didn't know yet. And from this, we were able to conduct further research. Topics included soil types, construction materials, types of connections, and analysis manuals. So the primary soil type at Patipa is known as a haploid acrosol. This is a very thin but very acidic soil layer. In the mangrove swamp, the layer underneath, which is a lot thicker, is called peat. And this layer is characterized by being both anaerobic, which means that there is no oxygen present, and by being made up of a lot of
organic material. So we were able to find that a typical refusal point, which is the depth at which you need to dig for a structure to be stable in the soil, to be 4.4 feet below the soil level. So that is how low our columns must go under the earth in order for the boardwalk to be stable. We researched 3 primary construction materials, the first of which was concrete, and then steel, and then teak wood. So concrete was found to be unsuitable because it had negative interactions with the acid in the haploic acrosol soil layer that would end up corroding the concrete. Similarly, the steel was found to be unsuitable due to the negative interactions that it would have with the seawater. However, teak was found to be a very suitable material, and that is what we are going to be using as a primary building material for our boardwalk. Teak, in addition to being strong, a hardwood, and naturally resistant to things like pests, due to the anaerobic nature of the soil, any microbes or bacteria that are typically digest wood require oxygen. So due to the fact that the soil is anaerobic, this is not an issue for teak. The only time that we are going to be using steel is for the large connections between the columns and planks. And this is because that area on the boardwalk is the most likely to fail, and we just want to make sure that it's extra safe. So the 2 reference analysis manuals that we used were the National Society or American Society of Civil Engineers and the National Design Standards. So the National Design Standards contains only information about softwoods, which are inherently weaker than hardwoods. So due to the fact that we are using hardwood, our factor of safety will be very high.
So a little bit about our prototype process. Our sponsor was very enthusiastic about having something physically built in the field. So we used that to our advantage to understand constructability. The first thing that we did was sit down with a pen and paper and put our heads together and design something that we thought would be a good idea to build in the field. Once we kind of cross-examined them amongst ourselves, we loaded them into AutoCAD. So we had some nice, clean design drawing sheets. And based on these drawings, we counted all the members that were necessary to construct these and the tools that were also necessary to construct these. And we developed a materials list. So when we went out and acquired these materials, they'd all be in one place. Also, before any construction was done, a set of safety standards were established. Whenever you're working on a job site, there's going to be hazards and there's going to be risks. So making up some rules so that everybody stays safe was very important. The first one being constant communication. Before anything is done, all of the hazards are announced so everybody's aware of them. And as they arise throughout the process, also communicated immediately. Second rule, usage of personal protective equipment, PPE, using safety glasses, using gloves for anyone on site and anyone using any of the tools. And the third rule is the trained operators rule. Only people who are trained in using tools and machines are able to use them.
So as Deidre said, we had to acquire several materials and also tools before we were able to construct any of our prototypes. All of our tools, such as a drill, washers, nuts, bolts, threaded rods, things like this, were acquired at the local hardware store called Coches in David. And then the materials such as logs and planks, we had calculated the dimensions that would be required for these. And then we went to a place called the Batipa Harvest Site, which you can see behind me. And that is the center of forestry at Batipa. And this is where all of the teak wood that is farmed there is cut both into logs and into planks. So we went to the site and we were able to find certain logs and planks that matched the dimensions that we had calculated. We selected them and then we brought them back to the Batipa field station where we constructed our prototypes.
The first prototype we designed, built, and tested was meant to gain us an understanding about the mechanical properties of the teak we had to go and build these prototypes and eventually the final design with. This was done by conducting what we call a deflection test, where if you apply a known load to a plank, you could find out the elasticity or, how susceptible it is to deflection. The higher value is, the stronger generally the material is. If we apply it in the known correct spot, we can then use an equation to go and solve for it. So this prototype allowed to have 6 planks of known lengths, widths, and depths. measured and applied a load at the center there. And we found out that our teak had an experimental average of around 13 gigapascals, which compared to some research values for teak material grown in similar conditions and environments was a little stronger than that average. So we are, we're happy to see that this teak is in fact as strong as we hoped it would be.
Prototype 2 was our first constructability test. So after we did all the CAD and we're ready to go out and purchase the materials, as DJ was mentioning earlier, we actually went out to the stores to purchase everything and realized a couple of issues. The first of which was the connections. The connections for this prototype required very large bolts to keep the members together. And when we got to the store, we found out that they didn't sell bolts that were that large. So it really gave us an idea of what was available in the area and what the sponsor could actually get their hands on. And then the last issue was the dimensions of the teak actually at the Batipa harvest site. On the picture there, you can see logs. Those are about 1 foot in diameter. The logs we wanted for our prototype were around 1.5 feet or closer to 2 feet, which was not possible. So that was really a key moment for us, and that really pointed us in the right direction in terms of designing something that they could actually build.
All right, so our third prototype tested similar things to the second one. It was another constructability test, except in this case, we used a different style of connection and used smaller pieces of wood. Sorry, there's a little pop-up right there. Anyways, what I was saying is we use different connections and wood and whatnot. This one was also built closer to the ground as there was no foundation there to ensure stability and ensure nothing negatively influenced this test. So anyways, our connection, as seen behind me in this diagram, involved taking two small wooden planks and using them to sandwich together the columns and the girders of the bridge. And these were connected using threaded rods, 2 on each end or 4 for the main piece. There's 6 of these connections. And this test was great because it gave us an idea of how these materials would apply in the actual construction process. Because seeing something on paper versus seeing it in reality are 2 completely different things. And this played a huge role in our final design.
Again. Okay. Or not.
Got it. So after completing the first 3 of our objectives, we now had everything we needed to come up with a final design. And before doing so, we had 3 main considerations. First was the existing conditions, that is the soil and at the proposed site, the water coming in from the ocean, and the weather, everything that would affect the materials or react with them. Second was the available materials. So as we learned in our second prototype, the sponsor doesn't have everything available to them. So we need to consider what they can actually get their hands on and transport to the site. And lastly is constructability. We wanted to design a prototype or a final design that would be easily constructible and easy to assemble at the actual site and transport. So that is really what we had in mind in designing and coming up with the final design.
After creating a design, we then need to conduct some analysis to verify that the structure could withstand any type of loading we could expect on that. To do that, we recreated a simplified version of it in the structural analysis software RISA 3D. It was in the model, it was created using a Douglas fir larch number 2, which is an American softwood that we were able to prove is weaker than teak in every front. So if it works for Douglas fir, then it should definitely work for teak as well. From there, we applied known loading that we found under ASC 7 standards, including a dead load, which is induced from the weight of the structure itself, a live load from any pedestrians coming in and out, temporary occupancy, a wind load, which is a lateral load characterized strongest at the low tide when the wind has the largest surface area on the structure, and lastly, a fluid load that at high tide when we see the water have a lateral force on each of the columns. From there, we then solved the model to identify the forces and stresses present across all the entire structure. And we compared those to NDS strength values and found that across every single point and across every single connection in the system, it was strong enough to withstand these types of loading. So therefore, since it works for Douglas fir, it'll definitely work for teak as well. And this is a strong design.
And here we can see an elevation view of the final design. This is if you were looking at it north. We can see the columns here coming down to the refusal point, that is where like they're stable, and the soil level normally about right above that. And then this is where the water would be at high tide. So we can see that the boardwalk is completely over the water, even if it is at high tide. And for the connections, we saw the connections that Tim was talking about with prototype 3, where this time we have steel plates hugging the girders and keeping them atop the columns. This whole thing is about 45 feet or 15 meters. And then all these sections, there are 6 of them, they're about 7.5 feet or closer to 2 meters in length.
We just want to send our thanks to a bunch of people that were involved with the success of our project. Our first one being Edmundo Gonzalez, our sponsor liaison. He showed us all over Western Panama, giving us a great cultural experience, helping with our project whenever he could, and in many times acting as a translator. Also, the supporting staff of Otema University, everyone we met was really friendly and really helpful, and we appreciate that. The employees of the Batipa Field Station, they quite literally went in there with a chainsaw and they cut our wood for us and did some things that we couldn't not do ourselves. So we really appreciate that. Also, a thanks to Grant Furrier, who was not directly involved with our project, but he handled a lot of the logistical aspects of our trip to Western Panama. Our project sponsor, Aaron Sekulich, for his guidance and expertise. Always appreciate that. And then a final thanks to all the WPI students that came with us. Today, we really enjoyed getting to know you the last 2 months, and we're really proud of your projects too. Thank you.
Got some questions?
Yes, any questions?
Just for our guests that may not be familiar with the WPI system, can you describe the difference between an IQP and an MQP and which one you did?
Yeah, so there's the difference between IQP. Yes, the question was the difference between the IQP and the MQP and which one we are. So the rest of the group here is on their IQP, which is their interactive qualifying project, which is something unrelated to their major. What we did today is the master qualifying project. We're all seniors. This is our senior capstone related to civil engineering specifically, and that is our one of our biggest degree requirements in civil engineering.
Garfield wants to know, are they in the chat on this? They're going to build the bridge.
Oh, we've given them, the question was, if are they gonna build it? If so, when? Thanks, Dad. So we've developed a nice 22-page package of nice sheets compiling the specking out the whole length from the itty-bitty connections to all the way down at the end of the other side of the boardwalk. So we've given them a recipe, and it's up to them to elect to go and use it, take from what we know here and expand upon it. You may perhaps get it verified by some engineers in the Panama area. So it's up to them. I saw Marina's hand first.
Did you determine a rough materials costs that it would take to build the full project?
So we don't necessarily have a rough materials cost, oh, sorry. The question was regarding whether or not we developed a full rough materials cost for this project. We don't have explicit numbers, but we do have an idea of what would cost more and what would cost less. The wood we used for our prototypes was harvested from the Batipa harvest site to bring down the cost a lot, because they don't have to import it from anywhere. They don't have to buy it or anything. So if they stuck with that, that would be relatively expensive. They'd be essentially recycling some of their wood. In terms of connections, it really depends on what materials they might use. Different forms of steel are more expensive. There's also alternatives too. We chose to suggest galvanized steel, which is cheaper than stainless steel and should resist a lot of the environmental factors. It's not perfect, but in regards to stronger materials, that was the better. Does that answer your question? Next.
I had the same question. I want to know what it would cost to build, and then another question related to teak as a material. Usually teak's associated with high-end furniture. It's a very expensive hardware, which is why it's normally grown here, because it gets the best price in market. So I'm just saying, do you know of any other constructions where teak is used in something not besides something's fancy deck or something?
I have an answer that comes from. Oh, The question was, the teak is a high-end material hardwood, and you don't see it too often in structures. So question was, is there any type of structure similar to this? And the answer is not really any structure that's been built in the last half millennium, is it 1,000 years? Back in the background phase of this project, I remember researching the Ubain Bridge, which I believe is in kind of the India area, if I recall off the top of my head. And it's about a half-mile long, made out of teak wood. It's still standing today, albeit it's a much larger, much more grand. And that was really the only key surviving structure that I could find in my research.
A few of you asked about the price of the final boardwalk. While we did not develop those numbers, we can tell you that this prototype right here that you see us standing on cost us $300 from the material cost that we acquired at Coches and from the labor cost for cutting down the trees and everything, all that in is about $300.
And that includes a $180 screwdriver.
Drill.
You're going to build it next Friday, January to April 2020.
All right.
Can you just repeat that for the recording? What you said?
So we have been told by Otema University that this project is going to be built during the next dry season from January to April, right? 2024, so that, so that means in May 2024, we're coming back.
Yep.
And celebrating on the bridge.
Okay, and while Aaron pulled this up, we were getting ready for our final presentation. Shush. Thank you so much for staying with us and joining us on Zoom and here in our audience. Our final project will be on the iconic Panamanian buses known as Diablos Rojos.
So as Grant said, we are the Diablo Rojo team. We spent 7 weeks here in Panama studying and documenting these buses. My name is Leah Kolb. I'm a junior architectural engineering major.
I'm Anna. I'm a junior biomedical engineering major.
I'm Micah, and I'm a computer science and interactive media and game development major.
I'm Sarah, and I'm a civil engineering major.
I'm Sam, and I'm a computer science major.
And this is Dr. Grant Burrier. He was our sponsor, and he's an associate professor at WPI in the social science department. He has multiple publications and is an expert when it comes to Latin American and Caribbean countries. This project would not have been possible without him.
So before we begin, for those who don't know, what are the Diablos Rojos? Diablos Rojos are a private decentralized bus system. It began in Panama in about the 1960s, and they were very common in the city until about 2013 when the government began replacing them with the new Metro bus system. They still operate outside of the city though. They're most known for their loud music and their extravagant decorations and bright colors. Their decorations often represent their owner's identity, the bus's origin, Panama's origin, and the route that they take.
So the overarching goal for this project was to document the impact that Diablos Rojos had on Panamanian culture and Panamanian identity. And we hope to share with you that these are much more than just a mode of transportation. Another goal that we set for ourselves was to produce a short film or documentary, and we also decided that we would be producing an informative news article. During our research stage, we found that none exist in English, so we hope to produce that to share Diablos Rojos with more than just Panamanians. A little background on these buses. They were imported into Panama from the United States as just yellow school buses, secondhand. They are a private mode of transportation, as said before, and owners have complete control over the routes they take, the fares, what's painted on the outside, and how the inside looks. They are known for being a little unsafe as they are unregulated. They have been in lots of accidents over the years, some even resulting in death. They drive very quickly down the freeways and sometimes leave the front doors open. In the early 2010s, the government introduced the Metrobus and the Mi-Bus in hopes to phase out the Diablos Rojos, even offering owners and drivers roughly $25,000 to take them out of circulation. A little historical background. One of the reasons that the United States came to Panama was to help them gain independence from Colombia and help them construct the canal. And when they came to do this, it ignited a large immigration from the West Indies, Spain, China, and the Arab worlds. This is due to the labor demand, people looking for work, and with all these people coming from different backgrounds, experiences, created the mestizo culture we see today in Panama. This also created the Diablos Rojos, serving in the underrepresented areas, representing those who demand to be seen and are not carried through the government.
So our first method was archival research. We met with the librarian and grant back at WPI to get a better understanding of the resources currently available on Diablos Rojos. We also wanted to understand the differing opinions on it. And so after we read through some of the literature, we decided to reach out to some people, make some contacts. Micah helped us reach our first contact down here on the ground, and he was an artist. And then from there, we snowballed and we hoped to meet mechanics, artists, passengers, and bus drivers, which we luckily did. After meeting people, we wanted to conduct interviews with each of them. And our goal was to make sure the interviewee felt comfortable. So we wanted to make it feel like more of a conversation than a question and answer session. And during each interview, we conducted personal ethnographies. So we took notes on how we were feeling, what we were seeing, smelling, hearing, as well as how the interviewee was feeling, and just general notes about the environment. And then after these interviews, we took note on major events they recommended we go to. Our biggest one was the race day in Chorrera, and there were a lot of Diablos Rojos prevalent that day. And with permission, we took lots of video and audio recordings, as well as photos to document Diablos Rojos.
So we found 4 major groups surrounding the Diablos Rojos, these being professions that keep these buses alive, those being the secres, drivers, artists, and mechanics. So to start off, the secres, short for el secretario, or the secretary. These people serve as the payment collectors, the fare collectors when people get off the bus. They also would announce where the bus was heading in a turkey gobble-like fashion, which gave them their informal name, Los Pavos, or the turkeys. They also did not have any formal education requirements. The man we see on the left, Luis Carlos, actually started working as a secretary at age 13. And they would serve as the driver's third eye. So with the drivers, we see they have a 1-to-1 ratio with each bus, unlike the secretaries. As well, they own each of their buses. So that makes them the commissioner of the bus, adding on lighting systems, speaker systems, and commissioning artists to make these yellow imported American school buses boring to canvases that roll around the city and surrounding areas. So the artists that do this process work with paint and airbrush. They typically apprentice under formally established artists of the past. On the left, we see Piri, who's saying that Panama without the Diablos Rojos is like a garden without flowers or a sky without stars. They truly love these buses. One thing that we found was very interesting was the creative freedom they had. Each bus is really an amalgamation of what the driver sought out for the bus to look like and the artist's vision of what it should be. Finally, we have the mechanics. These are machines, these are vehicles. They talked about how it's a miracle that they're truly able to get these to keep working. They talked of transmission and engine failure being common, beyond also just repairing it so they could get back on the road. They make additions like new seats, which were typically plush leather and nicer buses, adding rain covers, and in some cases modding the buses. We saw several buses on a race day with NOS attached to really get an edge in the drag racing. Another large part of our findings was comparing and contrasting the experience of Metrobus to the Diablos Rojos. Metrobus was implemented with the promise of air conditioning, full seal, quiet, safety, and comfort, as well as being on time. In our experience, we had to wait around 20 to 30 minutes for our Metrobus to show up, with the app not displaying the correct time for us. As well, the fare was collected in the beginning as soon as you got on, compared to the Diablo Rojo, where it's when you get off. With the Diablo Rojo, we felt that the seats were cushioned, leather, plush. While sitting on the Metro bus, it was a stark contrast with hard plastic seats. As well, the Metro bus, while air conditioned and full sealed, did not have great airflow as compared to the Diablo Rojo. Now that is being because the Diablo Rojo drives with its windows fully open, which does give great airflow, but it rains here in Panama, so that can be a problem having open windows driving. Many Diablos get around this by adding windshield covers, but that's an addition and not the norm within the Diablos community.
All the different parts of the Diablos Rojos community truly came together during Campeonato Automovilismo Turcal 2023, which was an all-day racing event located in La Chorrera. At this event, you could buy a $20 pit ticket to the race car side of the event, where expensive cars and their teams were preparing for the track, or you could buy a $5 ticket to the stands, which were rows of bleachers, metal bleachers, alongside a long dirt unpaved strip where dozens of Diablos Rojos were parked. They showed a pretty clear disparity between these two communities. The Diablo side lacked the same amenities and food trucks that the pit side had, but still their energy was pretty hard to beat. On the Diablos Rojo side, even when rain turned their long dirt road into mud, people were still celebrating, dancing, grilling their own food, and there were communities, drivers, and their families all decked out in matching shirts. This crowd was clearly not here for the race cars, as they were milling about during the day, paying attention to other things that were going on while race cars zipped around the track. But when 6:00 p.m. rolled around, every head was turned as the first Diablos rolled onto the track. The races themselves were pretty electric. There were flashing lights, blaring music, smoke steaming out of engines, and drivers talking trash to one another. Playfully, I'm hoping. But it was clear from this that this was more than just a competition. This was a joyful celebration of community. So clearly, Diablos Rojos are more than just a transportation system. They are a representation of subaltern culture that's different than the elite norm of Panama. Additionally, we found in our research that metro buses often don't serve the areas that Diablos Rojos tend to operate in, which are economically disadvantaged areas outside of Panama City. These buses then are able to step in and serve transportations to those communities. They're covered in Black and immigrant influences from their art to their music, and they represent a subaltern culture to communities that don't usually see it. After all, it's pretty hard to ignore a giant painted school bus rolling down the streets of the city. In a lot of ways, these buses are like murals on wheels. We also recognize that the government is currently trying to phase out these buses, so we encountered a couple of new uses for them. In the middle picture there, you can see a Diablo Rojo being used as decor. That's in a restaurant. we encountered people trying to turn Diablos Rojos into food trucks. And we discussed the possibility of Diablo Rojo artists painting the new metro buses to conserve a piece of this cultural heritage. This all comes with a huge caveat. Diablos Rojos are still alive. Not only are they an existent part, but they're an essential part of Panama's transportation system to this day. As the main service for poorer communities outside of the cities, in a lot of ways, Diablos Rojos provide for Panamanians what the government doesn't. Diablos Rojos are an emblem of subaltern culture. They're a reminder of the reclamation from US imperialism. And above all, they are a bold statement that people who aren't of the elite norm of Panama demand to be seen. We collected a lot of really interesting and beautiful footage during our project here and created a trailer for a documentary we plan to make later on. Feel free to scan this QR code if you'd like to take a peek at that. Give you a second. Thank you guys so much for listening to our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions. David?
Other than the selfie you took on the bus, did you actually get to ride on them? And if so, how many have you ridden?
We have ridden on many Diablos Rojos in our time here. Do any of you have an estimate of how many? I'm not sure.
So the question was, during our research, were we able to ride any Diablos Rojos? Yes, we rode one to kind of take in the experience, and then we rode one to actually take it to the end destination. Yes, Shabbat.
With all the advantages you mentioned, has government recognized the fact that there are these advantages, and now they recognize that this has been coherently advantageous to the society?
So the question was, with all these advantages, has the government recognized how these are advantages to Panama and to society? I think the government is currently trying to develop some new lines of the Metro bus to the areas that Diablos Rojos currently operate in. One of the most significant we encountered was La Chorrera. Right now, Diablos Rojos are the main form of transportation to get there, but the government is currently building a metro line there. I think it's kind of, it's hard to say whether the Diablos Rojos are appreciated for all that they do for Panama and how many people rely on them. But I also think in a lot of ways, it is the more economically disadvantaged areas that do get overlooked.
So you said that in 2013, they banned the buses inside of the city and so that the government's trying to phase them out. Has the Panamanian government like pursued banning them outside of Panama City, or are they still mostly and for the future allowed to operate outside of the city?
The question was, with the bannings of the Diablos Rojos, are they still allowed to be on the roads? So from what we understand, the government is not a fan of the Diablos Rojos, but they do provide for a lot of communities outside of the city. Yes.
So the two questions in the Zoom chat, we have Jamie Vargas saying, what was the most unique Diablo Rojo? We have Habits saying, how will you publish or share what you learned? And our friend Francisco says, congratulations to everyone.
So the most unique Diablo Rojo, we definitely saw quite a few. I think the most in our personal experience was on race day. We were filming within a Diablo Rojo and suddenly it started raining on us inside of the bus. They had hooked up some PVC pipes above to create like rainfall within the bus. And while holding a camera, that was pretty scary, but after looking down and seeing it was okay, it was pretty enjoyable. As well, looking online, there is a very unique case of a Diablo Rojo turned boat that also received scientific usage for searching for manatees, which was pretty interesting to see. However, we weren't able to connect with them.
And how will you publish or share with you?
The trailer is currently published. Oh, yeah. How will we publish what we've learned? So obviously we have the IQP paper that we submit. We also have the trailer for the documentary that is currently up that can be accessed through that QR code. And then we're also going to continue to work on that documentary and publish a full feature version with all the interviews and footage that we have. We'll be sure to send out a link when that's ready.
Were you able to find out what happened to the buses that the government bought when they decommissioned them in 2013?
So we heard about this mysterious, the question was, did we find out what happened to the buses that were just decommissioned by the government? We heard about this mysterious Diablo Rojo graveyard that was located a little bit outside of the city, and one day we made a trip out to visit it. Right now, there weren't as many buses there as we had seen in Google Maps images from previous years. But what we did learn happened is that those buses were basically just piled in a giant lot. People kind of looted them for parts and other things, but we did see a couple of decaying bus carcasses there.
How would you describe the people who formed this Diablo Rojo community? How did they treat you as researchers and people asking questions about this topic?
The question was how the Diablo Rojo community treated us. And I have to say, everyone we met and interviewed was very welcoming. They all easily invited us onto their bus and had a lot to share with us. And it was a point of, it was a proud piece of art that they had to share with us. And they knew that it represented the Panamanian community and their identity and their origin and their routes. And they wanted to be able to share that with the community, and they were very happy to do so.
Okay, well, we have officially hit the end of our presentations. Thank you so much for joining us both here in the audience and online. I would also like to pass the microphone for just one brief second to our director of the project center here in Panama for a couple rousing words. But again, thank you so much for your attendance today and being part of this very unique IQP experience that we have at WPI.
Thank you. So my name is Aaron Sekulich. I'm the project center director for Panama. Usually I'm very much involved, but this year I'm on sabbatical. So I have mostly stepped in to run this laptop. But I look forward to not being on sabbatical next year and being a lot more involved with the site. I want to thank everybody who came to see the presentations, and also Kurt and Grant for running the show for 8 weeks, advising all of the students. That's what I've got. Okay.